Hello, my fellow ex-JWs and apostates who have been shunned. So let's continue. The last time I was talking about the cycle of abuse, domestic violence within our home. Um, my dad would beat Chris, his son. Chris would beat me, and my adoptive mother would just watch all of this happening, I think with a bit of enjoyment. Anyways, let's talk about this two witness rule. I reported to the elders 30 years ago with the medical evidence that I had contracted a sexually transmitted disease when I was 7, and that my father, John, a drunk, an elder, presiding overseer, would just open our home to anybody, and that perpetrators were coming into our home. And he was always drunk. So when he would go up, they would go upstairs to use the bathroom. Some of them would come into my room. Now, they knew this was happening. And Dad would recite the scripture to me. Revelation 21, 2-4. And God will wipe out every tear from your eyes. Death will be no more, neither will mourning nor outcry. The pain will be no more. That doesn't help a 7-year-old child. But when I reported it, and I reported the physical abuse, like before I ran away from home at 17, I had suffered 6 fractured bones. And this was at the hands of my adoptive mother and their biological son, Chris. So Raylene would always ring up the school and say that, oh, well, Karen's got poison ivy, or Chris has got poison ivy. Yeah, it's the middle of winter, please. We all know what the leaves of 3 look like. So, but when I contacted Bethel in Sydney, in Ingleburn, I told them, I said, they're monsters. Not only is there no adoption contract for me, they don't even know where I was born. And, they've participated in systemic child abuse, and something needs to be done. So the first thing they said to me was there another person present who witnessed any of this happening? And I'm like, well, no. These men would excuse themselves to come upstairs and use the bathroom, but would come into my bedroom. And I've got medical documents that when I was 7, I had a sexually transmitted disease. And the police weren't called. Now, John, Dad, was letting these complete middle-aged male strangers into our home all the time. And they said, well, if somebody else didn't witness it happening, it probably didn't happen, so it's in Jehovah's hands. Really? Come on, guys. How many victims are out there? When you get 2 very damaged young adults, Raylene being a victim of incest and pedophilia herself, and John going to 13 different high schools because of the abuse that he suffered, which he couldn't help but beat on women. When you get two damaged people who are vulnerable and looking and yearning for a family, in comes the JWs. And they promise everything. The world, everlasting life. You've now got your family. But you're still sick fucks. For instance, I'm left-handed. Raylene, my mom, she didn't want me to be left-handed because she thought being left-handed meant that I was devil spawn. So she physically broke my left wrist repeatedly from the age of 4 till I was 7. This wrist. Now, if you can see, there's a tiny little scar there. At the age of 29, my husband, we found an orthopedic surgeon. And he looked at it, and because my wrist was so grossly deformed. And he said, "What happened?" And I said, "Oh, I was left-handed. Mom didn't want me to be left-handed, so she broke my wrist for 4 years." But they managed to perform surgery on it, as you can see from the scar. And they were able to re-break it and replace some of the bone. They had to cut things out and put steel rods in. So, this is systemic abuse. And I think with the Jehovah's Witnesses, they really hone in on the vulnerable people. And what needs to happen is, just because you're waiting for the apocalypse or waiting for Armageddon does not mean that you don't work on your issues now. Because all it does is follow one generation to another. And God knows I've suffered. No child should be subjected to that. I'll give you another example. Back in my earliest days, it was an orange book. It was a children's book. And we would have to read it. And Dad always said that if you sin, the birds from heaven will come out of the sky and pluck out your eyes and eat your flesh. That's in the book of Revelation. I think the book was actually called the Revelation book. It was an orange book. I was a little girl. Anyways, I was walking to school one day, and I was only in kindergarten. So I was 5. But this had already been indoctrinated into me. Always looking up at the sky for these, birds from heaven. And so I slipped on the ice, and I fell and I hit my knee. Okay? We all do that. I stood up, and I slipped again, and I hit my knee. And I remember I said, "Damn." Because John, Dad, always said that word, but I had said it. And I was so terrified of the birds from heaven coming out of the sky and plucking out my eyes and eating my flesh that I burrowed into the snow and hid. Kindergarten teacher, Mrs. Delagram, rings my mom And she said, Karen hasn't turned up at school, but it's only 30 meters away. So Mom comes from one end, and the neighbors start from the other end looking for me. I hear their voices, and I come out when I hear my mom. And I'm like, Mom, Mom, the birds are coming for me. The birds are coming for me. And she said, what? I said, I sinned. I said the word damn. And the birds from heaven are going to come out of the sky, and they're going to pluck out my eyes and eat my flesh. And she said, no, they're not going to do that for saying the word damn. But, don't say it again. I was 5 years old. Let that sink in, people. 5. Stay tuned for my next video.